people to get in, and then we'll start the show. Okay. Testing, testing, testing. All right. Sorry about that. So, welcome to Trucking with the Hook. I am your host, Richard. And today's topic is episode 3, the Miles Game. If you watched last episode, it was on breaking down owner operator's paycheck. This episode, we're going to see is short miles better than long miles. So if you're returning to the show, welcome. We appreciate you for your patronage. If you're new, please hit that like, subscribe, and please help our channel to grow. Sorry for the little delay in start. I was trying to aim for 7 o'clock, but we had some technical difficulties. So, with that being said, is 3,000 automatically better than 2,500? Well, duh. But it depends on how you get to that 3,000. Is it better to run the shorter miles to get to it or the longer miles? Well, we're going to explain that in this episode. And miles by themselves do not tell the story on whether it's a good week or a bad week. So, what is a good week? Well, a good week is, in my opinion, if you can make anything over 5,000 plus in revenue, in my situation, it's a good week. If you can make that doing heavy haul or flatbedding and make more than that, you're doing really good. But dry van, what I do, just as we call them, door swingers, um, that you know, that's $5,000 pretty decent. If you're just tuning in, please say hi. Let us know who you are and where you're from, and if you're a truck driver or not, and how many years you got. Hi, how's it going? So, how many miles do you got to run to be profitable? Well, it depends on your situation, but typically most truck drivers need to run at least anywhere from 15 to 2,500 to actually make a profit over their expenses. But how do you get to that point determines on, whether or not you you make the money. You've got to figure out what your cost per mile is. Once you figure out your cost per mile, then you figure out where your target. Me, I roughly, if as long as I keep it within the 2,700 to 3,000 miles per week, then I'm making money. Preferably 27 to 3,000. I'm making about $2,000 in revenue after all my expenses. If I get anything less than that, then it's below 2,000. But preferably, I would like to try to gross about 20,000 um, in a month. But so uh, to get to the 3,000, you want to keep most of your miles in the loaded category. That's where you're going to make your money. You're going to make you're going to have to do deadhead, but you're going, deadhead eats into your profit unless you get paid. A lot of companies out there don't get paid deadhead. Where I'm at, we get paid 90 cents a mile, which ain't probably the worst, but it could probably be better, but I'm not going to complain. I get money, so that does, factor into the equation. So when when I look at a trip, there's several factors I look at, and the one of the biggest factors is the deadhead and what the mileage is, because according to where I'm working at, um, depends on whether or not I am profitable on that run. I mean, the deadhead does make a big difference. So if I got, let's say, 2,700 miles for the week, and like, let's say 500 miles is deadhead, that's not going to be a good week. But likewise, if I got the same 2,700 miles and 100 of it is deadhead, that's not so bad because most of my money is tied up in the loaded section. It's like when I look like right now, if I was to book a trip from the house, I use this example. We've got customers in Hannibal, Galesburg, Chicago, St. Louis. We got some places down there too. If I was to book a trip out of Hannibal, well, let's say I got options. And the best option is Hannibal to California. I'd take that over going to St. Louis. But likewise, let's say I got a load out of Galesburg going to California. I would choose that over the Hannibal load because that is shorter miles. It's only like 30, 40 miles versus the 80 to 100 mile deadhead I got to do going, like let's say to Hannibal or St. Louis. So, yeah, it definitely does matter what kind of miles you're running because the same 27 to 3,000 miles pays differently. It all depends on how much of the miles is actually paid loaded. So, in my last episode, if you watched it, episode 2, we went over my pay scale, and the longer it is, the shorter I get paid. But here's the flip side. Even though I don't make as good per mile, those longer trips, 1,200 miles plus trips, get paid a lot better. So, like I run a 2,000-mile trip, in one go, that's a lot more money, than let's say I run a 700 trip, at a lot higher pay rate. So yeah, it's definitely different on the miles, and really, if you could keep the wheels of the truck rolling, you'll be more profitable. There's a lot of owner operators that go belly up because they get that paycheck and they go out and blow it, or they don't understand the business side of running a truck, and they don't make enough, or they make the wrong decisions and stuff. This is a business. It's not like you're a company driver. The company, and then the other thing I do like about it is, as an owner operator, I have complete control of where my truck goes. So I really like doing like the Midwest to the West Coast. That's like my favorite lanes to do. But like I said, if I picked up a load in Hannibal going to, let's say, I to New Mexico, I'll do that. That's 900 miles, 88-mile deadhead. But then when I get out to New Mexico, there ain't squat. And sometimes you do have to deadhead, but it's like one time I was out in Albuquerque. I picked up a load in Albuquerque and went down to, no, I delivered in Albuquerque and went down to El Paso. Picked up in El Paso and then took it out to Utah. Two 900-mile trips back to back. That was pretty decent. And then the last one I picked up in Ogden and ran that up to Washington. That was the third 900-mile trip. Now, the first and last one was a lot better trip, but the other one, I think it was like 2 to 300 miles on top of that deadhead, or on top of that loaded miles was deadhead. So, you got probably about three ish, I think, maybe almost 400 ish miles of deadhead. And that paid only 90 cents, but where I make my money is on the loaded side. And, like I said, my target is 27 to 3,000 miles per week. If I usually when I stick with that number, and I know a lot of people are like, well, that's a lot of miles. I'm like, well, I'm a truck driver. I'm a long haul truck driver. That's what we do, and um, the more miles you make, the more miles you do, the more miles you make. So yeah, and then the other thing you got to worry about is tires, fuel, and tires are you're probably your biggest expenses that you'll eat up into your income. I could have a $5,000 week and still only grow and only bring home like $1,600. And it's the fuel. Now, what one thing that does help when I am selecting that 900-mile trip, the carrier pays me what the customer pays them in what we call a fuel surcharge. So the fuel surcharge makes the trip a lot better. Now I know a lot of guys like, oh, well, we're getting out of trucking because fuel's just too high, just too high. It's over XYZ, we just can't make any money. Well, if you're an independent, probably on a load board, you're probably right. You're not going to make squat. This is where being leased onto a bigger carrier helps. Yes, you may not make as much money as, like, let's say this guy over here leased onto a broker board, but I feel that the higher my fuel goes, the more I make on fuel surcharge. And I'm actually making money hand over fist on the fuel surcharge. So when I book a 900-mile load and it's going, you know, I think it's at like a buck. I think we're at a buck almost 40 at nine. Well, it's either a buck 36 or a buck 40 something, somewhere in that range. And right now, our fuel surcharge is a 61 cents per mile. So you add that onto the uh, you add that onto your trip, and that's what you're going to be paid. So let's see here. I'll do some math. Let's go. Let's see. 900 miles. One point. We'll just call it $1.36. So off of a 900-mile trip at a buck 36 a mile and stuff, a lot of people say that's low. That's probably true. We make $1,224, and then 1224. The same 900 miles. Oops. Let's get rid of that. And then let's do the 61 cents per mile. That's 500 and okay. So Justin loaded and so I made $1,700 off of that 900-mile trip. $1,773. And then let's say 1773. That was a good year. That's when we had independence. It's either 1773 or 1772. Or no, 1776. So that was a couple years before. All right. So, anyways, so let's say we had 80-mile deadhead on that trip. 0.90. That's $72 plus 1773. Oops, go back. That's 8. So that now elevates. So now that trip that I just booked for at 900 miles now pays me with deadhead 980 miles is $1,845 with the deadhead pay, loaded pay, and fuel surcharge. And then, if you get like another one of those, let's just say that times 2, that's $3,600. And then we'll say 3690. And then we picked up a trip, a 1,200-mile trip for 1.32. It's 1,584. All right. So yeah. So fun. I know that's not right. Where's my calculator at? Oh, there it is. Duh. Okay. So let's see here. All right. 76. 1849. All right. Clear. All righty. So let's say 1,200 times 1.32 equals 1,584. Okay, 1,580. Say, and then let's see, we'll say we deadheaded 100 miles on that, and that was 0.90. So let's say 1,300 miles total. So that's $90. And then the fuel surcharge is 1,200.61 is $732 for the fuel surcharge. So when I'm looking at my trip, I'll look at, the loaded, the empty, and, the fuel surcharge. And then if it pays me enough money to take it, we'll take it. So let's see. So we'll say 1,584 plus 90 plus 732. That trip alone paid us $2,406. And then if you add the previous miles, which was 1849, so that alone was $4,255 for the week. So that's kind of what I look at when I'm booking trips. What's it going to cost? What's it going to pay? Go to from point A to point B. And that 4255, let's see here. Uh, let's see. 980 plus 1200. Oh, 1300. That's 2,280 miles. That's only two trips. So yeah, two trips. I'm already almost to 5,000. So yeah, that's not too bad, but I know some of you. So if like I said, that's just part of doing business as an owner operator. I could assure you this is not a Chinese video. So yeah, so if you're an owner operator, truck driver yourself, comment below what you run, if you're happy with it. So when I got as a company driver, the goal is to get as many miles as possible. So, I pick up a trip, run it, deliver it. Well, thank you. Thank you for the donation. And we at the end of the week, that's what we're paid. Well, it's kind of the same way as an owner operator, but not all miles is the same. So, what time is it? 100 miles on time. Well, depends. If you're running 70 miles an hour, you're looking at, you know, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. Um, and it depends on your schedule. So, but yeah, so the thing is, as a company driver, you'd pick up, deliver, and that could be 100 miles, 200 miles, up to whatever mileage. The thing is when I started realizing um, that when I started realizing that the more productive miles was the longer miles, I started making this. Well, it was about the same, but it was actually more because I was running the 1,000+ miles trip. Because when you don't, you're sitting in the dock, and when you're sitting, you're not making money. Now we get detention after 2 hours. So yeah, it so yeah, if you do the longer trips, they pay a lot better, even though they don't pay as good as some of the shorter trips. Where they pay the best is when you're doing the mileage. So at $1.42, you're running um, only 500 miles, 600 miles. where at $1.32 you're running like 1,200 miles. They're more efficient miles than they are stop and go. Because when you stop and go, you're burning more fuel, more wear and tear on the equipment, as to where when you're driving longer distances, it seems to be have the opposite effect on the wear and tear. You're still gonna have wear and tear, but it's not as bad. You're not eating up your brakes as much and stuff like that, unless you're like going through the city like Chicago or Dallas or something, and it doesn't matter then because you're just SOL'd or somebody has an accident. So, but when you're booking these trips, that's what you want to look for is how efficient can I be running this trip? So, with that being said, does anybody have questions? Anybody truck drivers that is watching, please comment. Where are you from? Are you enjoying this podcast? I mean, I'm not an expert in podcasting. It's more like me just rambling, but I'm doing my best. So hopefully, I'm keeping you guys entertained. So, but yeah, maybe maybe on the next show we'll have a guest or something that come on here and talk a little, you know. So yeah, but if even if you just travel in general, what cities do you hate to travel through? I'll tell you one thing. I hate going to New York City. I refuse to go into New York City because it's just too much of a headache. I'll do the Northeast if I have to, and stuff, but I stay away from New York City. That is my pet peeve and stuff. And you're stuck in traffic and stuff. But the biggest thing that I also look at is if the load is a drop and hook or a live load or unload, because that will eat into your profit. Because if you have to take more time to have somebody unload and load your truck, that then that eats onto your clock, and when you eat into your clock, that eats into your profits and your wheels. The biggest slogan is if the wheels ain't turning, you're not earning. So I think the most productive and efficient miles you can get is drop and hook on both ends. It's just an in, out, and back on the road. And that's where you'd really, truly make your money. I remember one time I showed it, and it never fails. And the biggest thing about drop and hooks is you'll go to a receiver and you'll deliver that load, and they're like, well, we're out of empty trailers, or those empty trailers you're not allowed to have because we need those trailers for. Then you got to go do the trailer hunt, which again eats into your profit. That's about the only downside I see to dropping and hooking. And it does happen. I mean, Crete's not, impervious. They've got to keep trailers, but they got like 5,000 drivers. So if somebody shows up before me, I've got to compete for that empty. So that does kind of suck a little bit, but it's part of the job. But 9 times out of 10, I'd say we're pretty good about getting in, out, and on the road. And to make it as an owner operator truck driver, this is what it takes. Uh, I've had the same. So here's the other thing I spoke on earlier about the fuel surcharge. The way you make money on the fuel surcharge is if your truck has really good fuel mileage. And with the fuel mileage, my truck is, I get anywhere from 7 to 8 miles per gallon. And I had a friend talk about this on his channel. And he says that if you're up in the mountains, you're going to lose a fuel mileage per gallon. And that might be true for some trucks. But I just don't think I could justify it enough to stop running up in the mountains. 'Cause I run coast to coast and I constantly from 40,000 between 45 all the way down, 5, 10,000 pounds. I don't really see that big of a difference. There will be a drop, but it's not going to be that significant for me to deter from taking heavy loads. And I've noticed that, yes, I do have a drop in fuel mileage when I go over a mountain, but then as soon as I'm out of the mountain, it comes back up. And another thing I want to say, a lot of people says if you drive slower that the that you'll get more fuel mileage. That's not true. That's actually false. And this is why it's false. If you drive slower, your engine has to lug harder. The harder your engine lugs, the more fuel it's going to take to keep that truck at the same speed, regardless when you're trying to climb a hill. If you're at a slower speed, it's going to make the truck work harder and in return burn more fuel. The solution is not govern your truck, not derate your truck, leave it at factory specs and let the truck run and breathe. By I would say run it between 70 to 75 is really where the sweet spot is. If you run it around there, your truck's not lugged down, you're using less fuel at highway speed, and um, you're conserving, power. You're still going to eat a little bit going over the mountain, but you're going to get a lot further up the hill than as if you were, you know, at a slower speed. And that's another thing that eats into your profit is if you're, like I said, if your fuel mileage tanks, you're going to be spending more fuel. So if I had a 3,000-mile week, one week I can make over $2,000. The next week I can make 1,500 or so. Well, that's because my fuel ate into my profit. So, with that being said, you've got to keep up on maintenance as well because maintenance is a big thing. If you start noticing your fuel mileage drop, check your tires, check your filters and stuff like that. Fuel mileage and maintenance plate goes hand in hand. And usually you can catch stuff early. Every time I'm home, I try to get the truck into the shop as much as possible. And that might be overkill, but while I'm out on the road, I don't want that truck to go down. If that truck goes down and that's the only truck I got, I'm stuck in a hotel. That's money out of my pocket. That's money out of my business. Now I got to, do that. If you keep on top of your maintenance and watch your fuel mileage, watch your tire wear, you know, y- you'll catch a lot of the problems early. And being this is my, well, where I'm going on my second year. So July 29th was my 1 full year mark as an owner operator. And I would say if I had to do it over again, I would probably do a lot more research into the business side of the industry. Now, with that being said, it's a lot easier for you to learn as you go. So Would I would I ever quit being an owner operator? No. I can never quit being an owner operator. That's the best thing um, that I've done. But learning how to run the truck more efficiently has been worth its weight in gold. It's it's everything and then more And if you don't treat it as a business, you're going to go belly up. That's just the name of the game. I mean, I love the fact that I quit going by the weeks and I go by the month. If I have a month over 20 something thousand dollars, that's a good month for me. I mean, my my truck is healthy, my business is healthy. It took a long career. I think what changed is when I went to the Mid America Truck Show, sat down, and also I use AI in my business. I use ChatGPT to help run my business. And I do that because ChatGPT can track things a lot better than I can. So, with that being said, I input all my data, my fuel receipts with the odometer. I put the trips and okay, this trip's going here to here. This is what it's paying and stuff. And I also put in my maintenance records, and I also put in my um, settlements, and it'll keep records of everything I do. And that has been a big help into running my business. And I got that from going to the Mid America Truck Show in Louisville, Kentucky in March. And they recommend using like Chat GPT and stuff for running your business. No, they're not going to replace I read a news thing earlier saying these companies are investing in driverless AI technologies. Well, that's great. Let them. Never going to replace a driver because I tell you why. Because a driver in a commercial vehicle, properly trained, properly vetted, is the best thing because that AI is not going to know when to stop. When it runs over the car, when it runs over a deer, it's not going to stop. The technology is not been perfected enough to where it is safe on the road. And I may never see it in my lifetime. But as for AI taking over trucking jobs, it's not going to happen. Okay. At the end of the day, I'm still going after miles. This truck has to move to make money. But I've learned that 3,000 miles doesn't automatically make it a good week, and 25 isn't automatically a bad week. You've got to look at what those paid miles and what it cost you to run them, and how much deadhead you had, and how much time you spent, and where those loads positioned you. That's the miles game. If you get put into a good market, you can make a lot of money that week. But you could also end up in a bad market where you're deadheading out and not making anything. I'll tell you one thing. What was it? The beginning of June, me and my stepson left home, and we ended up out in Kansas. Now, why dispatch did this, I don't know. But with Crete, they deadheaded us 500 miles from Kansas to Arkansas to pick up a load to do, I think, 700 miles down to Texas. On that occasion, excuse me, on that occasion, I would have rejected that load outright. But the reason I accepted the load is because they paid the deadhead as a loaded trip. And that actually benefited the business. So on that side of the coin, it wasn't that bad. Plus, I got better fuel mileage because I was empty. So, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think I've rambled on enough. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, put them down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And like always, keep the shiny side up, the grease side down. Catch on the flip side. And next Friday, tune in. We might have a special guest on the show for Trucking with the Hook. I'm your host, Richard Horvath, and keep on and keeping on. Have a good